In this video, we'll be finding the extrema of a function on a closed interval. Our first step is to find the derivative of the function and set it equal to 0. Then solve for x values, which we'll call critical numbers. We can also find critical numbers when the derivative is undefined. Step 2 is to evaluate our function at those critical numbers. Also evaluate our function at the endpoints of the interval. And then the least value will be the minimum and the greatest value will be the maximum. The example that we'll be doing is find the extrema of f of x equals 2x minus 3x to the 2/3 on the closed interval from -1 to 3. Notice that this is not a polynomial. So we will be ready for a derivative which is undefined at some point. Let's find our derivative on this guy. F prime is equal to 2, subtract, and we just use the power rule, 2/3 times 3 is 2, and then subtract 1 from the exponent, so I have -1/3. Now I'm going to write this as a fraction so that I can look at it. 2 subtract 2 over the cube root of x. So we can make this 2 cube root of x subtract 2 all over the cube root of x. So there's our point that is undefined when x is 0. So x equals 0 will be one of our critical numbers. Now if we set our derivative equal to 0, that'll occur when the numerator is 0. So 2 cube root of x minus 2 is equal to 0. 2 times the cube root of x is equal to 2. Which means cube root of x is equal to 1. So then if we cube both sides, that gives us x is equal to 1 cubed, which is 1. So our critical numbers then are 0 and 1. Our next step is to evaluate our function at our critical numbers. So f of 0 and f of 1. We also need to evaluate our function at the endpoints of the interval. So we need to find f of -1 and f of 3. F of 0 is going to be 2 times 0 minus 3 times 0 to the 2/3. So that is 0. F of 1 would be 2 times 1 minus 3 times 1 to the 2/3. And that is 2 minus 3 is -1. F of -1 will be 2 times -1 minus 3 times -1 to the 2/3. And this will be -2 minus 3, which is -5. And then f of 3, 2 times 3 minus 3 times 3 to the 2/3. That's not going to be a rational number, so let me get my calculator and do that. Is negative 0.2403. 0.2403. Alright. So looks like this is going to be our minimum. And our max is right here at 0, 0. Now this would be an interesting function to look at, see what the curve looks like. So let's go ahead and do that. Probably you'll have a sharp point up here where it's undefined, but let's try it and see. We have 2x minus 3x raised to the 2 divided by 3. And I want to set my window from -1 to 3. And my y minimum was -5. And my y max is 0. See, we have our sharp point right there at 0, 0. And that's where it was not differentiable, but it is max.